The eyes are JP, planning director.
Okay.
Teresa Holt, finance director.
Troy Buckley, town attorney.
Gina Hoover, town commissioner. Renee Dorner, commissioner.
Commissioner. Ken McCool, there for example. Hey, John Higgins there.
Patty Hobb, town manager.
John Irving, commissioner.
Malia Ford, the town manager.
Rob Kinneberg, fire chief.
Mark Tufano, commissioner.
Matt Investor, owner of the county principal of City Explain Incorporated, one of the consultants for your comprehensive plan.
Grant Yachi,
All right, let's go for the title.
Lloyd Fitzpatrick, assistant public works director.
CJ O'Neill, Public Works Director.
Tanya McGovern, insurance company. Or computers. Going to communication box.
Maybe.
Okay, Becky, you want to first one?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, welcome everybody. We have 2 days packed with information for you, so the agenda may not look overly detailed, but I can assure you there is a lot to get through over the next few days, and we are excited to get started this morning with a comprehensive plan update from Golden Mink. They will be spending the next 2 hours with us going over where they are in their process and what they have found so far. And so, Jay, I don't know if you want to do any additional introductions to that. Otherwise, we will turn it over to our consultants to take it away for the next little bit. Thank you.
Good morning. And if you don't mind, I'm probably going to stand up and wander around too. If that's okay. So I'm going to kick everything off today. Grant Yachi, senior assignment at Golden Bank. We'll start a little bit with some introduction of our team, work into some project background, which I'll talk a bit about. And then we'll talk about some of our partnering activities that we started in the last couple of months. And then Matt is going to take us on a deep dive and get some feedback from you to understand to the next steps of the process. And then one final thoughts to tell you a little bit about what we're up to next. So you just met us great. The team's much larger. Some of you in our interviews and some of our stakeholder interviews may have met a few of the other team members. Christine Network, who leads public engagement, Meg Nealon, who is also a co-planning lead, comprehensive planning side, John Cobb from Fulton Bank, who is our transportation lead, Jen Gregory, who many of you met, and there's also in the information that we sent a recorded, she could be here today, a recorded explanation of some of the market findings that we're able to uncover. And Ben Hitchings, who is helping us with our policy analysis as well. Three of them are all, 5 of them and others have been instrumental in getting us to this point. So I'll start a little bit with background. How many of you, Rob and Commissioner, have been involved in the comprehensive plan? About a quarter. So for those of you who don't know what a comprehensive is, really that kind of guiding document, that policy document that weaves together all the elements kind of holistically looking out into the future to give a sense of how you want to move your town forward. It takes a look at the land, primarily land use, how that integrates with transportation, housing, neighborhoods, open space, economic development and such. So it's really that document that makes all the other kind of policy documents that you have to move forward. As a guidepost for you and it's not a static document. It should not be a static document. It's going to move through time. It's reflective of where you want to go, and also changes over time as well. So what it does, what we're here to do, really two things. We're taking a look kind of at the comprehensive plan, which is townwide, but also taking a deeper dive into the downtown area as well. So that will kind of give us at a different scale, be able to take some of the large policies we all develop with you and then apply those in real physical form in the downtown area as well. So what these plans do is help, the great town staff that you have be able to make decisions, whether that be fiscal decisions, land use decisions, and such. So the better, the more applicable the policies are in the comprehensive plan, the better decisions your town staff can make on their behalf and bring to you as well. So what that, how we get there really is taking a look at a lot of research and some of the existing land use, projecting that out into future land use scenarios. Matt will talk a lot about that later today. We take a hard look at the market, understand what we think that market snapshot looks like now, project that out in the future to make sure that we're aligned with that. We try to be as creative as we can with our engagement, so we can engage with the widest range and diverse population that you have. We're always going to try to do as many different methods that we can to engage with folks. It's really about community visioning, right? So a lot of listening and interpreting, not only from you, we've heard a lot from you in our interviews, we've heard a lot from community as well. And then, there'll be recommendations. Plans are only as good as the implementation actions after that. So how do you actually let those things separately? So if you think about it in terms of context, the comprehensive plan is looking at like the fields of flowers, right? So it's at the 30,000 foot, but downtown plan, however, it's down to that deep of each one of those. It's great that I have a microphone because you all would not be able to hear me. They're going in and out. Trying to hold it really, really close. Maybe that's better. So, while the comprehensive plan will really focus on kind of broad statements, when we get to those to the downtown plan, we'll really be focused on how we take those broad statements, apply them to the physical form of downtown, and what does that mean for growth, form, housing, what does it look like? So you'll be able to see a manifestation of the policies of the comprehensive plan in the downtown plan in physical form. So you all know, but the idea in comprehensive plan is looking town-wide, from border to border, and even taking into account your neighbors and what their plans are as well. And downtown is really that kind of shaded area where it corresponds with the downtown overlay district as well. So that's where we're going to take that kind of deep dive. There are also a couple focus area studies that we'll do outside of downtown. We'll be able to take up to the level of downtown plan, but we'll be able to take a few other areas of your town and apply some detailed thought to what that may look like. So much like some of the area plans that you may have seen, we'll actually dig down into focus areas as well. So today, what we really want you to do is kind of think in the future, be visionary. The idea that we have to solve everything with a comprehensive plan isn't necessarily true, right? So this will yield other studies and plans that will get down into the details of how to solve a housing issue, a zoning issue or something like that. But today we really need you to keep at that high level and really think into the future, kind of what's, you know, what's going to be best to kind of keep the quality of life for your residents. How might that change in the future? Such. So, you know, great plans are really a combination of three things, right? We're trying to hit the kind of sweet spot in the middle where, you know, we ask a lot of questions and listen. You know, so that kind of community input, you know, our experience and the experience of your staff really comes into play with applying best practices from around the United States and modifying them to where they work best and they're most appropriate for the town of Matthews. And then we take a hard look at data and analysis to be able to make sure that you know, these aren't always qualitative recommendations. They're based in the best data that we can have available to us. And what that really does is our strongest opportunities are when we can align those three elements together. So create a successful plan. You know, we've got to listen. We've got to provide it in a format that is easily understood and the uptake from the average person can really relate to what the plan is. And that means using a lot of imagery, some of that custom, some of that specifically show different elements of what those recommendations are. So it's a visual representation of what a policy may mean as well, because we're not, as we say, planners can get pretty wonky about things. We can use a lot of jargon too. So we're trying to make this document accessible to everyone. We need to really think that this is a bold, you know, think about this as a bold vision. You can't have bold vision without some practical reality behind it, realistic strategies. So there's always going to be a balance between that, looking far into the future and reaching for a vision that you want to achieve, but making sure that we have realistic strategies to achieve that as well. That's what makes the plan most useful. You're going to hear this a lot with us. We're going to engage early and often. So the more that we can talk to you, the more that we can talk to your residents, all the different stakeholder groups, we're going to do that through the process as we change and Lorna's going to talk a little bit about. But what we're mostly trying to do in a comprehensive plan is leveraging the assets that you have, and that's human capital, that's your physical assets, that's the hopes and dreams that you have, it's the history that you've gone through. So, you know, the implementation of a planning process really requires a lot of collaboration between all elements of government and the public. So, you know, where planning is going to make decisions about influencing development, your administration is going to, and you are going to adopt and enforce policy. Public Works is going to build infrastructure. Finance is going to find funds, schedule projects. Residents and businesses are really going to engage and participate. So it's really important that all these elements kind of are in consensus about moving forward with the types of recommendations that we'll find in this plan as well. So where we've been so far is beginning. We did a lot of kind of listening and talking. We launched a survey. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've done a lot of stakeholder interviews. The stage that we're in, a lot of analysis. The stage that we're in right now is really that critical point of we've learned a lot about your community, and we want to start to test you different scenarios on how to move forward, which kind of opens the book up to a wide range of discussions And that's really what today is supposed to kick off, is that kind of wide range of discussions. Then we'll move into, once we decide on that kind of preferred scenario, that growth and conservation framework, start to dig down into that and define what that means. And that primarily is through the character of place or places. So we'll introduce that today as well. And then in October, we'll start to wrap this up and put it into a form where it reads as the document that it should, the vision that it should. So we have a couple upcoming milestones. The next one's coming up pretty soon, which is our first Beats and Bites. So we'll be out there to introduce and gather more input, get the word out more, hopefully get some more people interested. We have had one advisory committee. We'll have our second one in May, and then our first open house in May as well. And we're just going to talk a little bit about the partnering activities that we've had, but we'll be ramping those up as the summer months come on, and there's lots of things and people out in the streets, so that's a good time to going forward right now.
Okay, so should come as a shock to you all, and we've been harping on engagement, but really that is because in this modern era, people are really living in a very distracted life, right? We have a lot of things coming at us at work, at home, and in between. We're managing our families, we're managing our careers. Some of you have multiple careers as elected leaders, so we've got a lot going on. So this is a really interesting statistic that, more than half of adults in the United States will never attend meetings. We've got to engage with them in other ways than the traditional public meeting. So where is everyone? Why are they not showing up? We understand that in your community and similar, many people are online. And so our adolescent youth are also online, accessing it and experiencing it in very different ways. So with that, work very closely with your staff to develop a engagement plan. And really with the start of that, we wanted to talk about how we communicated the plan to your community. Starting with a brand recognizable with your town's strong logo, utilizing your town's great branding and coloring and fonts and all of the things that you have worked really hard on, tying that to the town brand. Developing an online tool for public input, and we will be housing all of the information that we collect and produce on that tool that is already linked to your town's website. So your communication team has done a great job coordinating with us and getting that information out. Also on social media and coordinating media releases. Other things that we'll be doing like today, the meeting facilitation, whether in a format like this or in smaller groups, making sure that we're strategic, meeting people where they're at. We will have kind of milestone celebrations of when we kind of hit some of our key deliverables. Open houses, Grant kind of referred to the one that we're going to have coming up on the 25th next month. Really excited about that. And if you haven't heard, we will be having that out at the Sportsplex. And I got to go tour that with Nadine, and I'm very pumped. It's beautiful, beautiful campus. It's going to be a really beautiful space. We're going to be able to look over the main field. So we're really excited, and we hope that's going to be a draw for folks to check that out if they've never been out there before. We'll also be doing pop-up meetings. Grant mentioned that, as well as what we call meetings in a box. These are for the folks who just aren't going to come out to your typical thing. We'll have other ways for them to provide their input, and so that's just something that digital you can download and interact with, or simply come in and pick up. So we're building those call meeting in a box. Really, they're paper kits that will have an access to their results to us. And we've already done several walking tours. So we've been really thinking all the different ways that we can see and meet and understand your community. So we always lead with data. This is for the entirety of your community, just kind of a community snapshot. And Matthews is a very educated, very engaged community. And then we also, if you remember the map of the downtown, really focused in on that downtown area as well. And the reason we do this is we want to understand what type of languages are spoken. What is the literacy rate? That's important. We want to make sure that we're using terms and information that is legible and understandable. So this is just kind of a helpful snapshot for us to kind of one part of how we start to frame our engagement. So with that plan, we start to set up these goals and we identify stakeholder groups. We've already had multiple conversations with stakeholder groups in the community. We also want to be meaningful with how we engage with underrepresented populations, making sure that folks who feel that they don't usually have a seat at the table or they're really directly heard, that we make sure that we come up with strategies and ways to get them involved in a way that makes them feel comfortable and heard. Also, we want to make sure that when people do give their time and their experience through their statements, their comments, that they can see those represented in the work. Really like to make sure that those things show up. So we'll use quotes, we'll align comments with recommendations. We really try and make sure that those lines are connected. And it's really about that relationship building, so building trust through relationships. So as this process goes on, we will continue to re-engage with you all. We'll continue to re-engage with our stakeholder groups. Grant mentioned the community advisory committee. They're kind of our next level of liaison to the community. Engage with them so they can continue to engage with their network. And so all in all, we can align vision and goals to recommendations. So with the schedule, Grant mentioned kind of the issues and opportunities, and we're kind of moving into that phase 2 now of our engagement with that goal to gather much feedback on kind of the direction we want this town to go in. So we have a couple different strategies. As I mentioned, not everybody likes to be engaged the same way. So we have developed a community advisory committee, a stakeholder group from people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experience levels. I think our youngest committee member is maybe 12 years old, and he might be one of the most engaged of the group. So it's really great. We also have a technical committee, which consists of town, county, state, and other agency staff that make sure that we are aligning any of the recommendations for the plan with their planning work and their projects and their policies, so that as this plan moves forward, it's aligned from county level on up. Today we're doing a policymaker briefing. This won't be the last. We'll be in front of you again as we move forward in the process. Mentioned those open houses, pop-ups. Those are really to engage with the town residents and stakeholders. We will be in front of neighborhood groups. Christine is working very diligently to kind of make those connections for us for certain neighborhoods that don't typically engage. And maybe we can come to one of their neighborhood meetings or smaller groups and have a conversation with them. So that's the point of those meetings, and then this meeting in the box for everyone. So once we get those rolled out, we want everyone to have a go at those. So today we've had over 25 discussions. Number is probably higher, but I was trying to calculate how many different groups that we've been in front of. So I want to thank all of you who have sat down with our project team so far and shared and discussed your ideas and concerns and opportunities for the town. So this is just kind of a grouping of them, but really the officials and staff, transit and transportation providers, education providers, downtown stakeholders, property business owners, employers, your anchor institutions like your hospital, the YMCA. We had a very poignant discussion around economic development that Jim led for our team. We talked to some of the larger property owners like Mecklenburg County Parks and Recreation, as well as some other private developers. People who are very interested in historic preservation, property owners and advocates, as well as housing and care providers for our unhoused population, as well as so on the right side are really just kind of those key themes that kept coming up in those conversations. You all did get a summary of the conversations, and that is a summary. You can imagine how many more pages we have of notes, but these are really, if I was to boil it down to a few key words, concerns and opportunities, and these are together. Density, gentrification, affordability, parking, specifically to downtown, and the town's identity all kind of bubbled up to the top of the things that we heard over and over and over again. Oh, I was worried about that. Wait. There we go. Okay. So we just closed the survey. It's been out for a while now, since February. I'm really pleased to report that this is a very engaged community. Our goal was somewhere between 500 and 600 respondents. Well, we almost had 800. Funny story. The survey actually closed by our 800th participant was taking it. So we apologize to Rob on that. We do want to hear his thoughts. So it's really great. That's a number that you don't see typically that high in community. So we're really thrilled about that. We received almost 4,400 comments, individual comments, on about traffic was a key theme that we heard there. And then, you know, just lots of responses. I do want to caveat though, none of our questions in our survey were required to take. So if you could pass questions, not everyone's responded to everything. We do that so that people will go through the survey. We find that they'll do it more in its entirety if you do it that way versus just kind of, you know, do a couple of them leave. So I'm going to give you a quick, with that overview of who responded. The majority of the people who responded described themselves. They could choose multiple as a Mathis resident. That's really, really good. We're hearing from the people who live here. As far as folks who live in town, the majority is in the 1 to 5 year range. You've got a lot of newcomers who are interested in the future and the direction the town's going. As far as age, it's kind of broken up fairly well, but I do want to know only about a quarter of the people gave this information. And then the same for race and ethnicity. However, we're not going to take lightly that this number is heavily skewed towards white. We want to make sure that as we're continuing our engagement, that we're making sure that we're talking to other populations in the community, as well as with gender, only about a quarter responded. So we did ask a question. This is kind of an open-ended question, right? What is your biggest challenge that you see for Matthews today? And overwhelmingly, it was around transportation. You'll see traffic, the John and Trade intersection, how connectivity works for bike and pedestrians, parking downtown, and a lot of people spoke about stitching Matthews together. That Independence 74 is a real given. We asked about how people like to get around. A lot of people want to walk and bike, but they prefer to drive because it's more convenient. And then we did ask, we're curious, so how often do you actually travel without a car? And over 50%, 60% always get their car, but there are some that maybe once a week or a couple times a month do opt for other modes of transportation. We wanted to know how people use your parks and open spaces and where they saw opportunities. So a lot of people get out and use the park multiple times a year, if not multiple times a month. when we asked them about some of the parks that they really valued, 4 Mile Creek Greenway came up to the top. That was a really important one for a lot of people. Like to get on it, like to walk, they like to connect to the neighborhood. Coral Lake, Stumptown, First Promptly, and sports like Idlewild, Fountain Rock, and others. We asked specifically about Stumptown Park. That is because we are in downtown and Stumptown in particular. And we wanted to kind of get a little bit of insight about what people thought about the park and where opportunity was. And it's really kind of around those updates. You know, could you have a better playground? Maybe more programming. The bathrooms be updated. People want to see a larger park, so an expansion of the park. And then I do want to point out that accessibility was something that came up in multiple comments about how people access the park, where they can park, how they can actually get around in the park. So just some things for consideration. And then the other bullets are more about like what are your hopes and dreams and desires for the parks in Matthews, and people really want a place to play downtown. We know we have a little small play area in Stumptown. They want some more places to visit families. State Park came up in multiple comments, extensions to your greenway, more neighborhood parks, and I'm sure you guys have heard about pickleball. It's like gaining momentum all over the country. Everybody wants pickleball. So we did ask about town character. We hear and we see a lot. Just want, we want to do Matthews. We want to look like Matthews, feel like Matthews. So we wanted to kind of dig down into that. Overwhelming what we've heard in the survey, but also in the stakeholder interviews, downtown is really the Matthews. When people think of Matthews, they're like downtown. They love how quaint and small town feel, that's safe and welcoming and family friendly, and they feel like vibrant and growing. They love that they're separate with Charlotte. We're close, but we're not Charlotte. But some feel that it's becoming busy and crowded, and traffic is an issue. So those are kind of the ways people describe Matthews, which is really exciting that they were starting to put into words what that essence of Matthews is. Safety. We always like to get a perception of safety in communities to understand how people feel. And a lot of people feel that Matthews is very safe. A lot of people commending the police in Matthews as well as being wonderful, a wonderful department. But when we kind of dug a little bit deeper, it was around kind of one of those quality of sidewalks, lighting, speeding, traffic enforcement, those types of things. And then we did see some comments that I want to point out about the perception of apartments and density are associated directly with crime and transit. We asked also about sustainability. Your Matthews residents are very proud of your tree canopy. They love how green it is. They're very interested in smart development, walkable 20-minute neighborhoods. So those neighborhoods where you can kind of walk, bike, and get what you need within a 20-minute span, and then allow for growth, but making sure that open spaces are incorporated, and a lot of comments about recycling and the elimination of single-use plastics. So that was kind of interesting that these were just comments that were multiple times repeated by others. So I'm going to keep going with culture because it kind of relates to all the programming that you all have here, all the great resources that you have. But people really love coming to downtown for the farmers market, for retail. They want more of it. They love celebrating events and special holidays in Matthews. They come for performances and recreation. They see a lot of opportunities to grow more events and celebrate arts and culture here in Matthews. They want to highlight local art more, and they want more spaces dedicated to these spaces. So if I'm going to look at downtown just specifically, most people, about 44%, come downtown on a weekly basis. And they're coming downtown to do a variety of things. They're going to restaurants, cafes, and bars. They're attending events. Some are shopping, some are conducting business whether they're going to town hall, post office. A lot of people are coming to this building, but downstairs to the library. This is third highest used library in the entire system, and it's just a branch, it's not a regional library. So your circulation numbers are astronomical, they're through the roof, amazing. But if people were to add recommendations for improvement, more parking came up in downtown. A lot of people feel deterred when they want to come downtown and go to a restaurant or do something. They can't find ways to park and get to that. People are very proud of the local business community and they want to see more of that. But specifically more retail. People feel, oh, we've got great restaurants, we've got great bars, have a few more family friendly places, but really like to see more retail. Safety for pedestrians came up not only in the survey, but almost in every stakeholder conversation. And then as well, family friendly activities. People kind of feel that you come downtown, get some ice cream, and then what? What else can we do with the kids? And then kind of more connection and more green space. So Grant mentioned that we did have an overview, a community advisory committee. This is Matt leading our great group not too long ago. And really, we did a bit more information with them about what a comprehensive plan is. We talked about what their role is. They're more as an advisory role. They're not making decisions. It's more we're trying to use them as a way to bounce ideas off of them and also have them advocate and get people involved in this process. We talked a lot about issues and opportunities. Much of what I just went over was what came up in that conversation too. So it's really interested that your community is very much aligned on your issues. And then we started talking about target setting, which I'm going to not go into that because I know Matt's going to do that in just a minute with you all. I did want to call out our youngest community advisory committee, Radeep. He actually came and set up at a pop-up himself and tried to get people to engage and take the survey. So he's been such a great advocate for the plan. I think he's coming for your office, sir. So we're going to continue the pop-ups. We have two open houses coming up. There are one in May and one further in the process. 2 more community advisory committees, and we're going to start to figure out those roundtable discussions. Do those need to be with the Crestdale neighborhood? Do those need to be with some of our organized religious communities? So we're going to start to kind of figure that out with where we need to be. And if you all have any thoughts on that, based on what we're saying. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Thank you all for having us. I'm going to speak to you today under the banner of deep dive discussion. And as we go through there, let me just take a small time out for you to give you a little bit of the history of planning and communication strategies. So part of our process will be tools to educate. That's what Grant did in the first part of his presentation, just kind of letting everybody know what we're doing, why we're doing it. Then we get into tools to inform, and that's sort of what Lauren was doing, getting you some information about what we've heard through our engagement process so far and the like. My job is to focus on the last 2 tools we have, tools to collaborate and tools to get feedback. So as we go through my section of this presentation, I should be talking less and less and less as we go through. The energy should be going up and up and up. We shall be exhausted after the few hours that we had together, generating ideas. It's so warm in the room and those kind of things really wonderful. But so I will jump in here, and I also thought that with this background of telling you that you're about to speak a lot more, just to give you a heads up. Also, thank you. 2 hours to dedicate during your planning conference is a big deal. And it sets things up really nice. And we there are other conversations to be pulling some of these ideas that we talked about this morning. So I really do think it will work well. And if we do our job right, and we communicate often, we had a community in the Triangle where the mayor came up to the adoption hearing and said, "Are you ready for your victory line?" And that's because the process led to the great document. So that's what we're going to try to do in this process as well. kind of starts with the interview we've already had with you in the community, but this is a big part of it. Generate some ideas, like Grant was saying in our process. We're ready to start testing things, thinking about things. So again, this is just your cue to get ready. So first and foremost, people are different in their lives and how they approach things. And some are more pragmatic, some are more carefree. For this conversation that we're about to have, I really want to make sure that we're being visionary and that we really test things and don't negotiate things out of our mind by ourselves. Let's just throw it on the table and really talk about it. We'll see what happens as we go through the process. And so Grant had a definition for comprehensive plan, so I felt like I had to have a definition as well and try to put it in words on this slide. So here we go. But just for our context, what we're talking about here, I just want to talk about how both plans are these visionary documents. We're looking way out into the future, usually 20 years or more, thinking about what could be for the town of Matthews. But I'll also tell you that sometimes the details of implementation, okay to say we'll figure those out in the process. It might be that your Unified Development Ordinance or your capital improvements plan or some other policy that you have as a board will fine tune the implementation of these big ideas. But we need to kind of work through them now. And if they're not generated now and the seeds aren't planted in these two plans, then nothing ever grows. So that's really what we want to try to do when we have our discussion today. Don't hold back. If you've got an idea, there are no bad ideas or wild ideas. But I will also tell you part of our process and our charge, for those of you who've known me long enough, know that I have a saying that I got from the mayor of Washington, D.C., who said, visioning is wonderful, but hallucination can be done. And so to that end, we will test these things and make sure that we give you feedback as we go. But again, for right now, I'm just asking you to just, throw caution to the wind and give us any ideas that you might have. The other thing is, it's okay to have different ideas, different opinions as we go through this. By the very nature of what we're doing in the process, and I'll go through this in a couple of slides to follow, I need to have opposing views to do some of our some of our planning. Just a couple of things for today. First and foremost, this is just sort of a public discussion. We don't have a debate. If you disagree with somebody's comment or idea, it's okay. I need to run opposing views for a planning process, so we're good. As we go through this, the scenario planning process I'm going to talk about, I'm going to keep coming back to that. As Grant was mentioning in the schedule, the springtime is really where we're focusing on that. And we're going to be looking at multiple futures for the town simultaneously, measuring different impacts and evaluating trade-offs. So that's what this discussion today is going to start us down that process. And finally, all ideas right now are good ideas. We haven't tested them, right? We may find out when we put data to that idea that it might be more of a challenge or maybe more of an opportunity for you as you go through the process and you compete within the region and those kind of things. But we'll know that later. For right now, again, anything is good. So we focused so much on the engagement process and the like so far. For any of the data geeks in the room, the people who like the math and the analytics, we're doing that too. So we are propping up right now something that we call the Matthews Community Viz model. We'll be doing that through our scenario planning. When we talk about scenario planning, we are just looking at multiple futures that we compare side by side. As part of that process, they need to be different, but they need to have some plausible and achievable outcomes that we're looking for. But that's really the only rule requirement that we have for you. We are doing this at the town-wide scale, so we can also turn the dial up and down and be able to get some feedback for the downtown plan as well. The really cool part about this is actually I was with you virtually months and months ago, where we had built a similar model where we were looking at the John Street and the widening versus keeping it at 2 lanes. And we had built that model already. So we're building on top of that model. We're going to improve and update and refresh it so it can be used again and be used when you're interacting with those other 8 organizations that you have to have that discussion with as well. And the data and the tools that we create, just like we did before, we left with staff. So there's a legacy and an ability to do monitoring and all that kind of stuff. And all the information that we create generates stuff, planning term of stuff. We have meetings, we create maps, we create graphics, we create stories and narratives around here that will be So again, this is in Matthews, this is actually in Cedar Hill, Texas, but just to show you that the examples that we can look through. We can look at things like, what does your zoning get you today? Sometimes people say, how do we know if we're going to change our mind if we don't know where we're going right now? So we tend to run a scenario that just shows you if you stay the course, this is where the compass is pointing right now. Other people will ask us to test some of these plans that you have. You have an entire library of documents you've already created, or there are some regional initiatives going on right now. What if we followed some of those? What would it mean? Or as you see on the right-hand side, sometimes things get a little more conceptual. And so we have just geometric circles and things like that. All that stuff we can look at when we look at a scenario planning initiative. Again, I need multiple ideas in order to support the process. So I'm just going to give a nod to a couple of things here as well. We had the existing conditions analysis. I call this the adult book report. It's been handed out. I'm not going to read everything to you in it, but it was really our chance as the consultants to prove we're learning everything that you already know, the staff and elected officials and appointed officials. It's really good for the community because they know it, what it's like to live and recreate and visit and do business within Matthews. But sometimes they haven't seen things through all the different lenses that we have in our existing conditions report. And so that's available when we have our discussion, kind of reference that report. We also have the town policy analysis that was done. In the policy analysis, we looked at that from both the downtown lens as well as the community-wide lens. We looked at all the different documents you had and said, well, what was that document trying to achieve? When was it written? Sometimes more importantly, what were its goals? One of the best things that we need to do for you as a consultant team is not drop into your community and ignore everything you've done in the past. So one of the first things we do is just understand what is the lay of the land. Understanding land isn't just flat. Like, how do we look at things and what's been done before, what's been successful, what might be aging, what might need some new energy to it. So we were able to look at that and have this document to summarize our findings. And we also had the market study, and we did have the presentation from Jen Gregory. I thought it was a great presentation. We put that in the discussion as well. She talked about the concept of retail leakage, which are the things that people who live in Matthews need to go outside to satisfy, as well as how many people are coming in. But she had a good spotlight on just kind of the state of retail right now, brick and mortar versus online and being experiential. And I thought that was a great aha moment where she talked and actually had the demographic in this, almost the millennials are the largest chunk now at population size and money spent and those kind of things. So, you know, how do we think about when we're doing a 20-year plan and beyond? How do we think about those folks being my age when this plan is reaching its horizon period? And so that's the kind of stuff we need to think about. Again, we have to free our minds to be able to think that far out into the future. So as I go back to my commitment to doing less speaking and doing more speaking, I'm going to use this section here to set the table, and then we'll have a conversation about kind of your feedback and your reaction to some of these things and some of your ideas that you'd like us to test. So building off of the reports that were just mentioned and the information Laura had shared with you from the engagement process so far, I've got a couple of planning things that I'm moving just to set the table for our conversation. We go in different ways if we need to and as needed. But first and foremost, I think there's this interesting idea, and about 10 years ago was when the light bulb kind of turned off for me, and I was seeing some work done in California and Georgia and other places, and they were doing things by saying, if you just do land use, you may not get what you want. And I've given an example here locally. Have you remember Fuel Pizza? You ever eaten Fuel Pizza chain? Well, if you go to Fuel Pizza in Uptown Charlotte at the bottom of the skyscraper, you go to the one in Davidson in the old gas station, you go to the one in South Boulevard, east-west, same menu, generally the same price you'll pay and everything else, but totally different experience. You're leading up to the building and when you're leaving the building and that. So this whole idea about capturing character became really important to us as planners about a decade ago. And we think if this plan can get the character right, everything else will start to fall in place and work in unison. So not just the land use, but how is transportation working? How is housing working? How are we doing parks and recreation and the like? We're to make sure everybody is on the same song sheet to make sure we're achieving something of great place and value and everlasting moments. And so we're going to take that that charter here for Matthews as well. We want to hear your feedback on it. It's gotten to the point in one community I'm working in right now. We had what was called our future land use map, which you may have seen before in other comprehensive plans. They said, wait a minute, we're committed to character, so we changed it to the character typology now. So I mean, there's this whole about how land use should fall into the character debate. I'd like to hear your feedback on that approach here from Matthews. When you get into that, we will still have a map and colors on the map, but we're going to be looking at maybe how people recreate, how you conserve land, how do people live within the community, how do they shop and work, and then a lot of emphasis on mixed uses. And because we are doing the downtown plan in unison with this process, we'll break the downtown almost into sectors or districts or places as well, in order to make sure we can get some very precise recommendations going forward. But just an example from actually another community is, what do you mean when you're talking about character? So instead of just having a one paragraph description about what the intended uses might be there, or we try to focus on what is the actual look and feel of that place. So we will talk about uses, but again, we're going to leave a list of permitted uses to zoning. Sometimes what happens in a community is the zoning and the comprehensive plan get too mixed up with each other. And so I have to be very clear on what things go in the comprehensive plan or the downtown plan and what things are implementing it in your zoning ordinance or other policies. So we'll do that as well. But we want to lay the seeds, again, in our plans to be able to direct some of that implementation. So what are the primary uses we're trying to look at? What types of buildings are we looking for? How tall are they? How much room do they take up on the property? Are they located towards the street, away from the street? Those kind of things. How big are blocks? Do they connect with streets? Are there cul-de-sacs? Open space, like how much preservation do you have? If you do have development, how do you create those public spaces within a development so people can interact and do people watching and the like? All that stuff will have comments for each of the different character areas that we create for the plan going forward. That's just my inadvertent. We have so many good marketing people in the world. I think they just dropped this slide in to remind you you're about to speak or something of that nature. So be ready. But I want to go over a couple more of the extra themes first as we set the table. As was mentioned by Lorna, we talked about development and density, right? That came back a lot, and you've had some recent projects and applications where density has been at the forefront of the conversations. So it's not just density in terms of what the project looks like, but what impacts does it generate? And that's where scenario planning is going to really help us kind of talk about the nexus between density and impacts. But as we look at how do people want to live within the community, how do people want to shop, how do we want to create places with activities, density is going to be a very big opportunity for us. And we've already heard different opinions about density. The other idea here is about building architecture and creating place. So this is actually an example in Richmond, Virginia, where you have the Starbucks and the restaurant and the beauty supply and all that kind of stuff. But it's a totally different look and feel than you might have going to somewhere on US 74 right now. And so if those uses are coming, on what terms does Matthews want to accept them? And what do you want that place to be like? Those ideas start in the plan that we're talking about right now. And then also talking about parks and open space, we want to make sure we lead with sort of a toolkit and definitions with clear intended outcomes of what we want as a community for open space and how we want that integrated. A lot of times we might go down the conversation of if you are having more density in your community, first thing you need to do is you're asking people to give up their private open space, their front and backyards. If you're doing that, you got to give them a lot of public open space nearby in order to be able to still satisfy those needs. So we got to look at how these things are all connected. So we might have a conversation on density, but we get into open space very quickly. All things transportation. I could do a whole presentation on this because of the real and perceived issues that are going on in Matthews right now, congestion and the like. I do it all in one slide with a complete street just to talk about all the different modes, how they interact, safety, mobility, accessibility. We can talk about all that as well. I also just want to sometimes hit the issues that are sensitive and current right now. So we have the CAT Silver Line. There's been recent conversation about the time uncertainty of some of those improvements coming through. And I just make sure we have eyes wide open as we go through that process. But again, we're looking so far out, we still want to have that in our mind, but we want to hear from you what your feelings are, given some of the current conversations going on Silver Line. Also, it is important to note, though, that if you go in the policy analysis, I thought it was really great, is when I talked about the station areas, it said right now, downtown Matthews is the character center. You want to talk about Matthews, you really go to the downtown and set your mind to the character you want. But it's not replicated as much through the community, it doesn't ripple through the community with certain elements and the like. So these station areas were one of the opportunities that were brought up in those policy documents. And I always love to see the word character in these other documents to kind of reinforce where we're going. You also have a lot of land and a lot of uses that have a shelf life. And so as you go through time, these things will start to age out, become obsolete. But we want to minimize the amount of time that they're an eyesore or a drag on the community. So if you think in a plan like this, we want to talk about, well, how should certain areas be developed if and when those property owners are rented? This is just an example you see from another community where you start from left to right and top to bottom. We have a thriving big box store right now. There's some room there, so you start to already have the end in mind. So when you have new uses coming in, you're looking at different drive aisles and things and how they can become future blocks. And again, you get to the end and eventually that big box store may move on to another location or may cease to exist. So how do you infill that and create a real place and a real asset looking 10, 20, 50 years? Just a couple of other quick ideas to put out there. Grant was mentioning the focus areas earlier. These are a couple of examples of focus areas we've done from other places. You can kind of see what the end result is. This is actually in Tennessee, and so this might be places like you have with the Family Dollar property, or that you may have with even the hospital, what their plans are. But if you have a use that you have right now, how does it infill? Because we're running out of land, and when you run out of land, they're not making more of it. And so what do you do? How do you make the best use of that land? Is an option and options. Also, this is another focus area study where you look at kind of a main street or a downtown, and in this community, we want to fill it in a little bit. So how do you do that? And how do you create that wonderful green as well that anchors the downtown area, front specific uses on it, so it always has activity in the life, and fill in the missing pieces as you go along. So now, not just talking less and less, I have abruptly stopped talking because now I want to have this kind of open communication. I've set the table with a lot of ideas that hopefully will start running in your head. If you have others you want to add as well, please do. We've got two very capable note takers to my right here. And they want to have access to the video for this event as well. Well, let me just stop and see kind of what's on your mind. And for this part, actually, I look at the time. Mayor, I might defer to you on how you want to do this. If you want to formally go through, comments, or you just want to have an open mic, want to do whatever's most effective in your, so you all handle it.
I think it'd be best just to let ideas sprout organically. I can start something that I was thinking about when I was driving in this morning. I heard a news report that we have so much carbon emissions that we're going to have to do a lot of work to address that, to pull carbon from the environment. Where I'm going with this is I think one of our constituents, David Ross, I think everybody knows, he asked us to look at making sure that anything that we build is very environmentally friendly. Look at better carbon footprint, things like that going forward. So I think that's certainly something that's top of mind for millennials. I hear that a lot of the younger people. I think anything that we build, we need to make sure that we use energy efficient, things like that. I think that's going to be important. Other comment I had, just off the top of my head, had the slide about fourplexes and sixplexes and things like that. We've seen those in other communities, and I think that's a really good way to address some of the density issues. We've seen some communities that have homes that look like one person lives there. There's actually 4 or 5 families structure, so it looks nice. Those are just 2 ideas off the top of my head. Who else has some comments? Larry Whitley, what's on your mind, sir?
One thing that, I'm a traffic man and I move traffic. One thing that I like to see downtown, we have got to have a parking lot somewhere that people can come and they want to come. Because we do the Stomp Town and more entertainment down there. They have to have a parking deck where they can come and park. And that's just, I visited the hospital a couple of weeks ago, and I had been downtown to the main hospital in a long time. And I remember where they used to park the clergy. And I went to park there, and lo and behold, there were no clergy there. It was a 6-story parking deck. And I said, for 3 years, the code. So wow. And I was truly amazed, but I was really happy to see a very convenient free parking there for people. And they had told us they were in the process of turning down the old parking deck. But as we develop our downtown and area, and I know a lot of people like to walk, but they like to have somewhere safe to park their cars and be able to walk to these and stay as long as they want to, then leave and then be able to come out. But I would like to see somewhere, some space that we can do a parking deck where people can come, because if we're focusing everything around our downtown, then you got to give people a place. Don't nobody want to walk a mile away and walk. I mean, this is not going to happen. Young people might can. Old folks like me and Mark can't do that.
You should. About some others, just first things on your mind.
I guess I'll go next. I think everyone knows my thing has always been kind of affordable housing and attainable housing. I met with the developer yesterday actually, and they were talking about, we're going to put some of these units at 80% AMI. And I said, what's the one bedroom rent at that 80%? He said, about $1,600 a month. That's the affordable price. And that was a little shocking to me that, that's what we're considering affordable now, which for a lot of families is not. And so I think as we develop things, we have to be really cautious of how we're doing that, because I think we're going to force some folks out of the town that want to be here or have been living here. So when we do developments, make sure that there's space to have it, and not just for rent too. I think so many, we have so many apartments coming to us, and when a developer's building for sale, make sure that people can actually put the roots in the ground to affordable housing. Because you can rent, being a really building that really good for a family who's not doing as well as others this year. Build some equity is the number one way to build wealth in this country. So I think that could be really important. And then I also want to piggyback on what the Mayor said with the climate. I read an article probably 6 months ago now, and they said old growth trees, so 50-plus-year-old trees, are the best at getting carbon out of the environment. So when we have these big developments where we're tearing down trees, making sure that we're saving some of the old growth, because it takes such a long time, so much energy to grow those. And so we tear them all down, you're kind of hurting the environment in that way as well. So make sure we keep those in these developments, because it's easy to have developers say, oh, we're going to replant, but it's going to take how many decades to get back to the growth that we have.
Those are good comments. I've recently had very in-depth conversation with like some of those housing types, which may were referencing this middle, what they call it. Just because we put that in doesn't guarantee they're affordable or attainable. And so if there is interest in that and it grows in the community, we have to put additional policies in to try to address that as well. So encouraging to hear we can look into some of that.
What I add on to what Mayor Pro Tem said, with affordable housing, when we're quote unquote cutting deals with developers, we're getting these AMI agreements for 10 years, 15 years. So I have a great concern that when I'm on my rocking chair drinking lemonade on my front porch, that all those agreements are going to go away, and we're going to be in a bad way. We have very few that are in perpetuity. So many of these agreements are 10 years, so 20 years from now, they're not gonna exist. It's gonna be market rate, so we're gonna have the same issue all over again. Something we need to address. Who else has some comments? Mr. Toronto?
Yes, one of the word I like to use is vibrancy. And to me, the definition of vibrancy is the sight of people out and having fun. So one of the drawing cards of our downtown right now is the fact that it does have that sense of vibrancy. So going forward, in your sense of place and all of that is that we have, in my opinion, hopefully a impetus to have new businesses when they come into the area to have outside seating areas. And I saw in your little rendering there that you had a building with a porch around it. And also homes that are coming into the area to have full-size functional porches. In other words, to get people seen by other people, to me, is the definition of vibrancy. So it is important to me anyway, if we're going to have a vibrant town, that we plan it in such a way where there's people constantly visible and doing things productive.
Other thoughts or comments?
What else? Surely someone else has a comment.
Remember, the things you volunteer now guide these different scenarios that we bring back. So if you've ever wondered, because you've been up at the dais and people are saying, you know, great for density, down with density, or we need more open space, we need less open space, you know, those are the things, if you just say, through my life experiences, we've been struggling with these things, that's what we can look at the value.
To add on to what Commissioner Capano said, I think it's going to be really important going forward. We see a lot of young people that are really living in a silo of their cell phone. They don't see other people. So we've endeavored with developments that are coming in to have the open spaces where people can meet and actually talk to one another and not talk to a cell phone. So I agree that that's very important. And some of the developments that have proposed recently have nice, large open meeting spaces that I think are going to be crowded with people and be very vibrant. The Commissioner of the Bogan, Mr. Urban, I'm sure you have a few ideas.
So is there anything I haven't said in the last 20 years that we don't constantly talk about here? You don't generate vibrancy until you deal with the taboos. And you have to realize that everything is interconnected. You want open space? Well, how do you offset open space with single family homes and the cost of living? So you got to bring in the density conversation. And then you got to bring in the transportation conversation. You got to bring in the road network conversation. This is, I've been up on this board for a long, long time talking about the education and the process of understanding that, you know, with density does not bring crime associated with it. But it brings the economic development engine that a retailer says, well, maybe I will move into downtown now because I need the heads on beds to support myself. As evidenced by that retail report, a lot of the people in downtown are supported by the locals. Only like 3 or 4% are supported outside. We could do better than that. So I can't say enough, and I've always indicated that the heart of the is downtown. We don't have a healthy heart on downtown. We're a suburb. And from that standpoint, I think we have an opportunity to strengthen downtown by expanding its role in terms of its connection to the sportsplex and to what I call Matthews Gateway, for lack of a better word, which is 45 and John Street. And so the town, as we know it, would extend into that triangular three-legged stool where you have old downtown, locals, arts and crafts, things of that nature. You have a sportsplex entertainment complex, which offers another genre. And you have the gateway, which may bring more higher end businesses and as evidence of the Hendrick piece, talking about white collar, high paying jobs. But I think the thing is, the conundrum is, and I've seen it many times over, when we suffered with it, we get these projects and someone says, well, yeah, we're going to be doing 7 units an acre. And all of a sudden, everybody's raising cane, the pitchforks are out, the whole 9 yards. I don't know where our dwelling unit per acre is downtown. It may be a little higher than it was 10 years ago, but it's probably nowhere near where it needs to be. And you just have to have those really brutally honest conversations about, well, how am I going to give you more open space if I can't have more people living here to utilize it to offset the land value. So it's a really vicious cycle, and I get Commissioner Poole's conversation about affordable, but that may mean 6 plexes and 8 plexes, and giving a developer, a density bonus if he gives us a pocket park. So I've been talking about this for a very, very long time. I had a planning staff that's, up until 20 years ago, kind of what we're talking about trying to be Mary about having those conversations. That's the direction we need to move into, but we can't cherry pick. Well, I just want open space. I don't want apartments. You just can't do it. You just have to have a comprehensive policy that accepts it. And I think we all realize that we have good single family stock. We have neighborhoods that can remain as they are, but there's this stitching and repairing that we need to do. I live probably a half mile, maybe a mile from the intersection of 74 and Sam Newell, but I don't have the sidewalk connections to get down to Sam Newell to get up to the shopping center, and I wouldn't have a problem walking there. Why everybody loves to drive is because there are none of those sort of medium neighborhood amenities that get you out of your car. And I think that was the toughest rub with this latest Santé proposal was everybody's used to driving in their car. Well, why do I want something right next to me? But I think in looking at what Hendricks is proposing, which is the manufacturing, high-end manufacturing, that's going to bring in the genre of individuals that are used to living, working, and playing in a very closely environment. And so, okay, driving a car a mile is not the greatest thing in the world, but it's a heck of a lot better than 30-minute commute. And to be able to go home, park the car on Friday evening, and not get back into it on Monday, I think really is the kind of everlasting goal, in my opinion, of Matthews, is that we have all the attributes so you don't have to go outside of it. And that you have the other attributes that invite you here. History and other pieces. So you know all these things and you're just trying to pull it out of people. I think the question is having the chutzpah, the policies that realize that there are vast areas of land in downtown that we can build where a single story building doesn't cut it. And the question is are we ready to accept that? And I think if you've got, say something like 1 to 3 year, there's a huge majority of people in the 1 to 3 year gap, 1 to 5. I'd like to know where they've come from and their sort of seeding as to how they visualize this situation. Because if you've been here for 40 or 50 years, I'm sure you like it the way it's always been. And interestingly enough, people that are here from 1 to 5 really don't know what transformations we made in 20 years.
But I'm really, really hoping that this scenario planning initiative, I think, really for a comprehensive plan will start to feed that appetite for some of those answers and the connections. Because it's unfortunate timing that a lot of times those conversations happen when you have an application. Now we're able to step back a little bit, and because I have to run different scenarios by definition, people get really excited from the onset of that, like density or traffic or open space, whatever your hot button issue is. I can say, okay, I've got this track running here. You might be more attracted to this track, but then I've got another track and another track. And so this is that time, I think, for the community to really just say, put it all on the table and see where things take us. The other part I'm encouraged by hearing your comments is when we do this, we'll report performance kind of in a holistic model. So sometimes the best solution for transportation is horrible for affordable housing, or it's horrible for the environment. So we're going to try to connect those dots as we go through this process. And I do feel, at least from my experience, that the safest time to do it, because you don't have an application in front of you, you don't have neighbors right next to it, and we're really just having a value-based conversation. So hold me to it. We'll bring the scenarios back when we look at.
I'd like to add a comment about transportation. I recall many years ago kind of having a aha moment. I was sitting on the 10 in Los Angeles, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning. Traffic for as far as you can see in all directions, and there's people that we're going about 2 miles an hour, stopping every 100 feet. Took me about an hour and 45 minutes to drive 12 miles per day. And I thought, if an alien came from another universe, and there's one person in every car, and this is just really stupid. It's not sustainable. So I think we really have to push public transportation going forward. I think in the future, we have to get people to embrace public transportation. I was talking to the mayor of Huntersville last night, and she was talking about the need for micro transit. Renee, you and I have talked about that quite a bit. So I think if we made it easier for people to get to where the buses are, maybe the Silver Line someday, I think we're going to have to change every person, the idea that every person has to have a car and drive everywhere they go. I think we have to embrace public transportation more going forward, which is not going to be sustainable. Our roads can't handle the number of people who are going to need to go places, and it makes more sense to have multiple people in one vehicle than one person in the car. Commissioner Hoover and/or Garner, do you guys have any comments?
Okay, we're going back to your presentation, for mixed use development. Okay, I believe that fits best within the downtown area, because you've got people, that can walk and do what they want to do within the town. And I'm not sure all that's going to go. We are limited to our space, in my opinion, the character of Matthews, the way we're going right now is actually being destroyed. I think people have moved to Matthews to get away from the hustle and bustle of Charlotte. And they so I feel like Matthews, we need more single family homes. People, they want that home. That's just the American dream. You go out in your backyard, have a cookout, you've got your little neighborhood and you've got your little community there. But as I had said, I think there should be within walking distance, certain shopping, whatever would fit into that, But we're cramming, I look at it, we're cramming so many people in such a small area. We are creating the traffic issue within this town. And you're putting 500 some people in one area and more in this area, more in this area, more. I mean, we're creating that problem. And public transportation is good, but that's a personal choice for me. And I can't remember when, but we're thinking there's supposed to be a certain percentage of EV vehicles, like 2030, 2035, something like that. Well, then I think we should put EV stations here and about more, to help with that. I just feel, for me, I get the vision, but to me, Matthews is special, and we just don't want to ride across from Charlotte into Matthews, and you feel like you're still in Charlotte. We still need to keep, we're we're losing, if not have lost, that charm of Matthews, I grew up here. So, I have seen Matthews grow, it's just unbelievable, the growth in this town. And it's getting to the point with the new development, you're not gonna know the difference between Matthews. So I want something special, different, and not just apartments everywhere you turn. I mean, you want some home ownership, well, for me, I think maybe condos could be something to think of downtown. Just to pull, younger, I know the younger generation, but my son doesn't really care to do yard work, but he owns a home, But I know the younger generation, they want to come in and do their thing and have fun, which I was younger, I agree with. But yeah, it's just within downtown, I can see the mixed use, a better use. But as you move out more, I think people, I just see it. Want single family homes, you want to raise your family, you go in the backyard and do this or that, or let your kid ride the bike through the neighborhood, things like that. But in a walkable distance to have what shopping we need, stuff like that. I just don't, all the townhomes, apartments, to me, that's just not me.
But again, that's going to be the beauty of having this different. We look at one that's sort of what is in Australia, they have this concept of the complete neighborhood. So it's the housing and the park and the school. That's their definition. We can look at some of that stuff. And we can look at, again, with the different scenarios, where could even more single family neighborhoods go? Because you might end up reaching a point within our horizon of your plan that you've actually built out, if you build out a certain plan. Just you run out of land. But I think I've done the last study for you was something like 19% of your land was kind of still in play. So depending on what you do with that land will dramatically impact whether you're a community of X people or Y people. So that it'll be interesting stuff we can look at.
I've made the comments a few times in the past that I do agree that I don't think we have all the single family stock that we have forever, and that needs some portion of the developments. Family, absolutely. Mr. Garner, you got some comments? Anybody on staff have some comments? Jay? Mark, argument.
If you've ever been to one of Pastor Whitley's church services, he always ends with, give credit to somebody else and make sure that you don't take credit for yourself. And I want to tie this into the transportation conversation. For years, I've been listening to Commissioner Urban talking about the Matthews area transit system, a micro transit, and something that we need someone who takes public transportation myself in and out of uptown Charlotte. Fortunately for me, I live within 1,000 feet of the bus stop. That's preventing a lot of people from actually taking public transit passes because they can't get there. So to have some kind of internal Matthews systems in order to tie into the CAT system. And I've been very much in agreement with Commissioner Urban about that for years. And I'm hoping that could be part of the future plan.
That's interesting. We can look into that. When you work in South Florida, every community has a local transit circulator. That's just what they do. And so that would be interesting to see if we can bring some of those concepts here. The other thing, Mary, going back to your question about driving and congestion, like in the city of Miami, they actually just turned it on their head and they said, well, instead of vehicle trips, when we do a traffic study, let's do person trips. And so they generate how many person trips it's going to create. They say, how many of these might be walking trips? How many could be transit trips? How many? And so it just completely, like, I'm just saying, like, if you're going to change your mindset for your vision doctrine, maybe even go into how you analyze it. And so we, if you really want to kind of walk the walk. And so there's some.
Yeah, I want to circle back around on Commissioner who was saying, I know President Biden has slated to go electric vehicles by 2030 something, 32. And I agree with her. we need to have some type of station where people can get an electric car and be able to come downtown and have a charging station as well to, a certain, to greenhouse saving and make sure we're going to continue to add to that. But, I come back around to, traffic. And my background was to move traffic. I did 30 years as a state trooper. When traffic is sitting still, it costs commerce a lot of money by sitting still. I heard Commissioner Urban was talking about the Gateway 485 and John Street. And I drive away quite a bit because I do some stuff down in the trail and come back through that way. And I know there's future plans for Union County to widen John Street. And when I get off at, get at the new 485, we got some great developments on both sides of down on John Street down there. But when I get off and come up to Graylock, there's 4 lanes, then into to Graylock. And we're doing a lot of development right there. It's Graylock Ridge and going all the way through and coming through. But then after you pass that freeway, go to 2 lanes. And even Renee lives on John Street, just past the post office, there's 3 lanes. And I've said this and I stood by myself 10, 7, 8 years ago. Now, I wasn't all in favor of Super Street, but we can do a 3-lane street that little mile and a half, it's not even a mile, maybe not even a mile, from there with Charles Buckley to Graylock, that was straight. Do so that traffic can continue to move, but with a great sidewalk, transportation, where people can walk, 10-foot sidewalk, and I know I'm in favor of the wider sidewalk because it runs by my church. And I know when I see the people and the families, that connectivity that bring, but we have got to do something. We got to change our mindset on that little half-a-mile stretch, Charles Buckley to Graylock, where traffic can move and be accessible for people to be able to do the greenway and walk and carry the family and still have traffic that people that live there get in the center lane, turn, but the traffic keeps moving, so it won't back up. That's a real backup there.
Let me make one comment about I'm probably in the minority on our board, but I absolutely do not believe the town of Matthews should be building or paying for electric charging stations. I think private entities should do that, and they will. If it comes to the point where 60 or 80% of the cars are electric, there's going to be an electric charging station, like gas stations. I don't think the town should be in that business. We don't have Matthews gas station, so I don't think we should have Matthews vehicle charging. I don't think that's good. But private corporations should take that on.
Becky, did we work with Duke Energy to get some by the train tracks? Get some years ago, did we try to get some charging stations by the train tracks? Yeah, they got that passed. They never got built.
Like DJ, was that a proposal that y'all, what was it through a grant program, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, it was, before decided not to.
I can't remember what the vote was, but I know we knew that had been brought up. And we do have the luxury. We do have a Tesla dealership in Matthews, which has charging stations. So it's something we have that not every community has. I do want to go back to the walkability sidewalk portion of it. I know Renee has spoken about this many times, but having wider sidewalks and more walkability makes the town more affordable, because you don't have to own a car, you don't have to take your car and spend money on gas to go. If I could walk on the sidewalk to get to a grocery store instead of having to drive was playing the Matthews Festival, I'd do it. I think a lot of families would do it. So that's when we have these conversations about mixed use and these bigger developments. I think you can kind of look at it. Okay, if there's a grocery store or a convenience store that's in walking distance from my home, that's going to save a car trip from someone who primarily would drive to Arboretum or to Matthews Festival or to Publix. So there's gotta be, those are part of the ways to solve some of these problems. It's also an affordability thing. You don't have to pay for gas or drink for a car. There's a lot of people do that. I know a lot of young people who don't even have a car anymore, live in town Charlotte or South End, and they just walk everywhere and take a bird scooter, or take public transportation. I have to keep it on to the bird scooter. But yeah, I think it's connectivity, but it's also an affordability question as well.
So Matt, David, cover your response, so there's gonna be opposing points. So I'll just say two briefly. One of which is transportation. The common response is planners, you often have, think about the traffic, remind people you are the traffic. We're all trying to get somewhere. The person behind you is also complaining, trying to get that by entry. When we look at this goal to create better places, better community, moving traffic more quickly, more efficiently is honestly somewhat opposed to our goals. People walk the community. Think with the residential later, they will quickly tell you that homes facing 4-lane highways trade at lower value because they're not desirable. People don't want their kid chasing a ball into a 4-lane road with cars being by at 50 miles per hour. So finding this balance where we are not living in gridlock on a daily basis, but also resisting the urge to widen all of our roadways to 4 lanes or 6 lanes or to I-10 or wherever we were in LA. I think that's something we need to address. Part of this is finding balance there.
CJ?
Thank you. I kind of want to bring that up too. One big thing to realize is most of the traffic we have in Matthews is not from Matthews residents, it's people driving through Matthews, coming from Union County to Charlotte and back there during their hours. So finding a way of moving traffic around downtown Matthews has been something we've been working toward for years. And once we can get that accomplished, I think the local roads we have in the downtown area are able to handle the traffic from the downtown. So take, you all know what we're talking about, moving around 45, express lanes, and trains. So
Mr. Urban?
So let's piggyback on that, because you're absolutely right. But the reality of it is that a large portion of people that live in Matthews drive into Charlotte, and the people coming into town are replacing them. So we're moving car A to Charlotte and car B moved into Matthews. So we don't have that mix of that blend to be able to work and play in Matthews yet. That the person living in Matthews lives and works in Matthews. I think it's only 4%, 14% of people who live in Matthews work in Matthews. Something like, I mean, less than that. So I mean, but I just want to follow up. At least there was one person listening over the years, and that's Mr. Tono about Matthews Area Transit Map. It just, anybody knows about planning history in Charlotte is a great historical marker about transportation and land uses, is that you would take the trolley, turn of the century, the first electrified trolleys, and go out to Dilworth and things like that, where there were single family homes, and bring them into town. And of course, in the 50s, the automobile sort of destroyed that connection. And ironically, the best planning principles are the ones that we've taken from over a century ago about living over where you work, mixes of uses, that, and the micro transit sort of situation, the horse and buggy or the trolley to get you into the more immediate things. Then on the regional side, it's the train sort of aspect of it. So I think that's really important. The conversation about the single family is, I don't have a problem with single family stock. I don't have a problem if you want to talk about new single family, but new single family starts at $450,000. So are you going to establish policies to tell developers we'd like to see more 1,200, 1,500 square foot, 2 and 3 bedroom single family type projects that may not have as much land around them, et cetera, et cetera. But that's that vicious circle. Because if we don't look at mixed-use opportunities, land value is going to continue to go up. I mean, it's, the guy asking for the White House over here, it's 1.5, right? 1.2. The little rancher next to our parcel. Yeah, I mean, it's just absurd. So you buy it, that means you got to build a $2.5 million home to make it work out, from that aspect of it. And I think the other thing is that there's also policy issues here that go beyond just our town. Gina mentioned condos. I wouldn't touch a condo with a 10-foot pole. It's too litigious. So until you get Raleigh and policymakers that say, well, you know what, Mr. Developer, you build a condo, you've got to do X, Y, or Z, but as soon as you build a condo, there's someone out wanting to sue you. And so that's why there's virtually no condos being built. But if you want to have sort of a pay for play or vested interest like when you own a single family home, I'm all for it if you want to go in that direction, but you better change policies with the mindset of America, because when's the last time you've heard of a condominium project going up that wasn't so expensive to cover those costs?
But as soon as you go up, you go secure, I mean, it starts to be done. Yeah, one of the other concepts that I'm just gonna say these words so that they generated here is, when we talk about mixed use a lot, I might test some kind of concepts of what we call mixed density. So even the same type of use, and like a neighborhood might have different housing types in the same neighborhood, if they're the complete concept. So just so you know, I might look at some of those ideas as well. It's called mixed density residential. Bring that back to you to look at.
I've had the discussion with several developers because people from all ages, particularly young people, but really across the spectrum, have asked me why developers aren't building high quality 1,200 or 1,500 square foot houses. A lot of young people Ken's age, say, I don't need a 3,000 square feet or 4,000 square foot house. Like that, a 1,200. I need a 1 bedroom, a bath, a den, a kitchen. That's it. That's all I need. And the developers tell me they don't make enough money on that type of product before they will build it. I think it'd be hugely successful. I don't know if we change our zoning policies and encourage that type of development. But there's a lot of people that no longer desire, 5 bedrooms and a den and a living room, and dining room, and all that. They just need it, don't want it, don't want to eat it, don't want to clean it, don't want to take care of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is all these ideas we're batting back and forth. Some towns have implemented car sharing companies they've heard of, where maybe a car is just parked somewhere, and if you need to use it, you can go check it out and drive it and bring it back, and many people share the same car. And in other communities, particularly young people, you have great ideas. You might have 6 people that own one car and share the cost of the car, and park it somewhere, and 6 different people utilize that car, and they split it. Okay.
So I had a part 2 at the micro level. We've had conversations for years now about character of downtown. In the 1880s, we were building 2-story buildings. 40 years later, we're building 3-story buildings. So we've moved pretty glacially with how the town just went in my perspective. But I think it's okay to acknowledge that we're not old safe. We're not Williamsburg. If you look at those places and how they got to be where they are, they tore down buildings of later vintage from the late 19th century, early 20th century that wouldn't themselves be historic today. We're not Old Salem, we're not Williamsburg. It's okay to evolve. But how do you augment what we have? And more we heard about character of the survey, and people want to maintain the character. But how do you graft newer development into our downtown that brings vibrancy, add more residents, get more people on the sidewalk, more people that can walk to our restaurants, bars, shops, not have to drive there? Like, I think one of my goals in the process would be like, how does that new development look, and how does it like honor our existing building stocks and what we have today? I'm not suggesting that we want to use their buildings either. I think that's something that we've been grasping at. We're trying to figure out how we find that balance. And I'm trying to kind of kickstart some thought process here. I'd love to hear your thoughts on architecture. I know
it's a great point, and I'll segue into how you all want to react to that question with, actually, I was part of the team that did the Leesburg, Virginia. And Leesburg, people have passion about their downtown. You all are passionate, but they will, it's intense. Leesburg. And as part of it, it's only about 2% of their total land area. Though. It is the defining thing for them. It doesn't matter that if you drop me in any other place, it looks like other suburbs I've been in, it doesn't matter. But so for there, what they're doing really good on is saying, like for the corridors, what elements do we want to remind people living here that we don't have to replicate what's in the head? So as well, on our upper story windows, we want to put an arch on the top. So those little design hints, as we're getting up, are kind of what we want to get to in terms of you can have your core area, and you can have contributing areas. You don't have to replicate everything. The market won't actually support that. In Oklahoma and Texas, the sales tax driven, they put red everywhere on the map because they need a cash register. It's the only way they make their money. And it looks like missing teeth because these things get kind of picked off, but there's no just place being created. So, you know, those kind of elements are important, and you don't have to replicate one place that's been successful. It's how do you, borrow from that to make your other places.
Well, I also think too, the most logical place for density is our downtown. And when you think about density in downtown, there's really not much. You have the little apartment building right next to here, and then you go down and you have the Briley, and that's about it for densities. Mostly smaller single family housing. And so as things evolve, it's looking into density and getting people out. I mean, when you go to Food Truck Friday or Beats and Bites next Saturday, you're going to see a million cars fighting for the few spots we have near Stumptown Park. You have density and young people, and density doesn't only bring young people; it also brings people who are transitioning. Their kids have moved out; they're not quite yet to go into a retirement community, but they want to downsize. So it's those families as well, and those residents as well. Get them out of their cars; they're able to walk to something. They're able to walk to town hall. So I think we have to really have that conversation of, density is important, and we want downtown to become more vibrant. I think you have to have more people, more density. And there's such a finite amount of space that we have in our historic downtown. So I think that's a conversation that has to be had.
Yeah, that being said, I would not be in favor of putting, 3 or 4 or 6-story buildings downtown. I think it will destroy the character of our downtowns. I think there are places like the entertainment district that we could do that, but I certainly wouldn't, want to build a 6-story building near this building, for instance. I think it would really cast a shadow on our historic area. Who else on staff wants to make a comment? Nadine, I'm sure you have many great thoughts. Anybody else on staff have any comments? Becky? Like we're all talked out.
Exhausted, right? It's you.
Well, not my brow.
Thank you all very much for your time again. I know that this is a large portion of your meeting agenda for the 2 days. Won't say goodbye. We'll just say see you later. I might have that victory lap. And note that Annie not to call on you because we have 1 minute. Don't make a call sometime. Just ask for insight and put on something. I'll pay it somebody in for 15 minutes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Take a 10-minute break. Thank you guys for the presentation. It was very good. Very good. All right, we're gonna move on to our fiscal year 24 budget review. Everybody take a deep breath. Thank you.
Sure.
Board.
Sure, thank you, everyone. So what I do have in front of you is a different presentation than what was emailed out last week and what was posted. And we'll get into the detail as to why as we move forward. But bottom line, we've had some information that has come to our attention in literally the last 48 hours that has changed a few things about the budget that we are looking to be formally presenting to you on May 8th. And so the purpose of today is really just meant to be a broad overview of what we do expect to have in that budget in a couple of weeks. It is not meant to be a full budget presentation, but we can certainly dive into any of the details that you would like to based on what we have here today. Again, we will hear the full budget presentation on May 8th. And so the caveat here, the numbers are still being finalized, information is subject to change. And some of the information that will come to light recently is a prime example of that. So we want to start by just focusing on the fact that we did, of course, have a countywide revaluation that is a part of the process this year. As a reminder, the countywide revaluation now occurs once every 4 years. So this is the first time that we have moved to a 4-year cycle. The last revaluation was completed in 2020. From the assessor's office, the goal of the revaluation is to try to bring assessed property values as close to being in line with fair market value as possible. Obviously, we've seen some volatility in the market in the last little bit, and so that I know has created some challenges for them. But through this process, they do expect that there is an appeal law factor. Basically, what that means is when the assessor's office mails out the tax bills, there is a certain segment of the population that chooses to challenge those valuations. And so they go through a process, and some of them are successful with having some adjustments made to their values. And so they do advise that we factor in what's called an appeal loss. And so what they are advising, what they foresee for Matthews, is that we're likely to experience approximately a 3.1% appeal loss, which would be a reduction in the actual valuation compared to the tax bills that were mailed out. So that 3.1% is a guesstimate. It's based on past history. It's based on what they expect to see in the future. It can come in a little bit higher. But that is, they are advising for Matthews. Those are specific percentages for us compared to our neighbors. But when you do look at the valuations in Matthews through this new process, they are on average 33.6% higher than the 2023 actual values that we saw for the town. So the 2023 actuals, we were at about 5.4 billion in valuation of property across all lines. And after the appeal loss, we're expecting to land just north of 7.2 billion. So just a reminder, because revaluation can be a little bit of a complicated process for the general public who isn't always privy to the math that goes into the calculations. So this just is really meant to walk through and show how we calculate the revenue neutral tax rate. And the revenue neutral tax rate is the rate that if we were to assess that tax rate, we would earn the equivalent amount of revenue from those taxes. And that is after taking into account the increase in valuation, and then the average property growth that we used for our last valuation, and then to get to that growth factor, which is sort of the equivalent of growth. And so bottom line, when you follow all of that math, the revenue neutral tax rates for Matthews going into this budget process would be 22.695 cents per hundred. So again, these are some updated numbers over what was provided last week. But we are looking at coming to a budget in 2 weeks that would have a property tax rate of 27.5 cents per hundred valuation, which is going to generate a budget that is just south of $35 million. So again, when we look at the revaluation rate and the revenue neutral rates, that 27.5 cents per hundred would be a 4.81 cents tax rate above the net revenue neutral rate for FY24. And it would also be a 2 cent reduction over our current tax rate, which is 29.5 cents. So we always like to look back at history. So this is the tax rate history for the town of Matthews going back 10 years. As you can see, we have been as high as 35.5 cents prior to our last revaluation, and the 27.5 that we are expected to propose would be the lowest. But of course, these are applied to the valuation of each property, and so it does impact every home a little bit differently. So we do like to break down what that tax rate would actually mean for a typical property owner in Matthews, and we use a variety of values of properties to just look at some examples. And so we went ahead and we looked at what the 2020 taxable value is of homes ranging from $200,000 to $700,000. The 414.9 figure, that is what the average home value was assessed at out of the 2020 revaluation. And again, every home is revalued differently. So each one is going to come in at a slightly different property value through the new revaluation. But if we just take that 33.6% average increase and apply that to all of the values, just to try to get a sense of what kind of increase a property owner might be looking at in their property value. The current tax year at a 29.5 cents tax bill for that 449 in value home, they would be paying $1,224 annually. The 27.5 cents, that tax bill would go up to $1,524, which would be an increase of $300 on the year, which is $25. Again, this is just so we want to take a look at what is driving the budget, and we'll start with revenues. And so, of course, the ad valorem taxes is the largest area that we generate revenue in any of our budgets. Based on the 27.5 cent property tax rate, we would be generating just south of $20 million in revenue. That does not include the tag fee, that is a separate line. Because under the new revaluation values, 1 cent will now generate approximately $700,000. So just for perspective, right now we're a little north of 500,000 per penny. So that means every time we might go up on a tax rate, it does sort of more bang for our buck as far as how far that number goes, so that it's for us on a basis. We're also seeing significant increases in our local option sales tax. So if you look on the screen, we went into the FY23 budget with what we thought was actually a fairly aggressive projection of about $5.1 million, and we are about 90% above that projection. We expect that we're going to close the year around $5.7 million in revenue. looking at what the state is projecting for increases in FY 24, they are expecting those escalations to continue to slow a little bit, but to increase approximately another 6%. So we went ahead and applied that to our projections for 24. We think that local option standard tax generating about $6 million. Investment earnings has been the surprise of the year, if you will. So if you'll recall, the interest return on earnings, the interest rates were so low, we had dipped down to really just earning a few $1,000s a year. But with some of the changes with interest rates, combined with, this is a great time to be sitting on an extra $10 million that we are with our ARPA funding, but that is sitting in our account earning interest. And so we are projected to bring in approximately $1.2 million this year in revenue from those investment earnings. And so when we look to FY 24, although they are projecting that interest rates will continue to stay high, if not even increase a little bit, as we anticipate the likelihood of starting to spend down some of those ARPA funds, wanted to be thoughtful about the reduction that we might start to see in some of those investment earnings. So we are still projecting approximately $1 million in that revenue line. The important thing to note about investment earnings, you can see from the slide here, is it is not a stable revenue source. So these are certainly good times to have significant money in the bank, to be earning the interest, but that is not a revenue source that we rely on for ongoing operating expenses, because the market has the ability to take a turn at any time. And so we could find ourselves falling short on that revenue, and we would not want to be ill prepared for that. So you'll see throughout this presentation, the idea would think about some of the one-time costs that you might think about tying to investment earnings, so that revenue source go away in future year. Okay, because it was only a one-time expense. We do anticipate that the GHSP grant, this is the Governor's Highway Safety Program grants, that main year of funding has ended. So we were previously earning about $80,500 in that grant revenue. KD and police department staff are working on potentially being able to generate a portion of that back through a reapplication of the grant program that you'll hear about this coming Monday night. But that is not a revenue line that we can rely on, but we do want to preserve funding and budget for the police department that grant is currently supporting. We also just have some miscellaneous other increases in the budget, approximately $125,000, $126,000 across all lines. So when you add all of those up, we are looking at a budget that is approximately $6.3 million higher than the budget. We will get into why. So the book is an old presentation. So what you have in the book is based on a 27-cent tax rate. This has now been updated to be based on a 27.5 cent tax rate. So that's where the difference is. I just emailed you the updated presentation a few minutes ago. We did this printed, like a printed copy too. So this is really where the change is coming from. And so these are the expenditure drivers that we are seeing in the proposed budget. And these are expenditures that are either previously approved by the board or they are mandated with maybe a little bit of wiggle on the one. So we'll go through them and we'll circle back to a little bit of detail. So the first one is, of course, the pay plan and market adjustment that the board approved back in January that was implemented in February. So right out the gate, that's a $2.2 million budget increase that we knew was going to be in the FY 24 budget that has the equivalent increase of a 3 cents property tax increase. The solid waste contract and landfill fees, this is the number that has changed that you'll be hearing about more on Monday. So we did have an RFP that was recently completed and a projection of what we thought would be the total cost for the solid waste contract. In negotiations with the low bidder, it was realized that there was an error in some of the calculations. And so we have had to go back and add approximately $389,000 to the budget that we were not aware of until about 24 hours ago. So the board will have some decisions to make on Monday related to that as far as do we want to continue with the same level of service that we have had for solid waste, specifically for our bulk collection. Right now it's an on-demand service, but there are some other options if we want to try to get that number down. But that's really going to be a board decision related to desired level of service to the community and whether or not that is something that we want to try to absorb in this budget, or if there are other things that we need to try to tighten up on in order to get that overall cost, start the overall budget down to hopefully a little bit lower rate. TJ, I know you've been reaching out to Melinda regarding what the quarterly cost might be. Are we able to get that confirmed, or are we still waiting on them?
We're still waiting. They said they are to try and bring it back.
Of course. Someone asked me, and I'm thinking we're right, we're doing away with the plastic bag, man, to the paper waste bag. But
You're talking about required for yard waste collection?
Yeah.
I don't think that is that a mandate, TJ?
So you have the option, so plastic bags are going away. So you can use paper bags, you can use containers, you can use tarps. Just the plastic bags themselves.
But I noticed that they're not picking what they're doing with the plastic bags, and this is what one of the person was asking me. They dump your yard waste and just go with plastic bags.
So we've had some issues with how they handle that in the past, which is one reason why they do that. What they're supposed to be doing is taking the plastic bag, opening it, dumping it, and collecting those plastic bags on the truck. And
That's not happening.
periodically, we've had issues with that. Had to remind them, started, and so it sounds like that.
Yeah, that's not happening because I've experienced myself. They dump the trash or whatever, like you said, turn the bag, dump it in, then they put the bags back on the yard, or you can put them in the other recycle. Not recycle, but other.
In the trash. And that's one of the options is trash. If the trash truck had not been out there with those plastic bags in the trash cans, so that when the truck can dump those, you're saying they're doing those.
I'm experiencing that opening the bag, dumping that, but then put the plastic bag back out and just leave it there on the side where you can. And you have to pick it up, put it back in the other recycle, other garbage.
So again, looking at the solid waste contract and landfill fees numbers, this is based on the information that we have today. If we wanted to continue with the same level of service that we currently provide for all types of solid waste collection. But again, that is something that may potentially be able to move based on board direction this coming Monday. As it stands right now, that would be equivalent to a 0.89% tax increase. We have also seen some mandated increases to our state retirement contribution. So these rates are set by the states and the cost is passed along to us. The employer is required to pay those portions of the premiums. So when you apply that, and that number is just for existing staff, it does not account for any new staff that we might be hiring. So just across all existing staff, it equates to a $370,000 increase in state mandated retirement contributions, which is over half of it. We are also seeing some premium increases to our risk management lines, including workers' comp and property and liability. The number that we have is a projection, so the league did not open up their portal to be able to submit our information for renewal until maybe a week ago, which was very late. So our risk manager was right on it. We got everything ready to go and got everything submitted the day that it opened. I think the moment it opened, but we are waiting for those numbers. We have worked with our advisors, and these are numbers that they are saying are probably pretty safe to be expecting. And this is due to we have had some increases in our experience with workers' comp claims and also with claims on the property and liability side. And then we've also added, so when we're buying property and adding to what asset insurance, that does increase these premiums. So it's across both lines. It would be in total increase. We expect of about 100,000. We are hoping to have that number confirmed prior to the formal budget presentation on May 8th. So we can hopefully lock that in, and ideally it'll be a little bit lower than what we are projecting, but that is what we have as the best information. We also have a number of software system upgrades that have already been approved across the organization. Those have come to the board at various times. It includes our project management software for work. It includes some of our GASB requirements for finance, the improvement to the phone system for dispatch of the police department. And so across all of those various areas, annual costs for those software systems will be approximately $100,000. We also are starting our debt service payments on Rescue 8, which is fully in service now. And so those payments will begin in FY24 to the tune of $94,000. And really the only other notable area of increase that we have not, of course, been able to control it is going to be our fuel increases. So this is across public works, police, and fire, but across those three departments, we are looking at approximately $50,000 increase to our fuel costs in order to keep our vehicles on the road. So all total, that right there combines to 4.97 cents in increased costs. So we have also packed a lot of additional things into this budget that we are calling key proposed additions. So these are items that would certainly not technically be mandated, but if you're looking for kind of big things or bigger ticket items that you point to in the budget that is driving that total, these are really the items to call out. So you'll hear a lot more about funding for Fire Station 3 throughout our planning conference. But when we look at the total cost of operations, if we were to be all set to go out the gate for the entirety of FY24, we would expect to need just north of $1.5 million in order to operate that station. As we look at the actual schedule for when we expect to start construction on Fire Station 3 and the timeliness of being able to get the station open and operational, we do not anticipate needing to start to hire staff for that station this July. We have more time. And so we have put together what we're calling partial year funding for personnel. We do want to provide some career path opportunities that would require us to hire uncertified, untrained individuals and put them through their certifications. And so in order to hit our timelines and be able to have everybody ready and certified to go once Fire Station 3 opens, we would start some of that hiring partway. And when we combine all of those positions together, it would cost us about $960,000 in FY24 dollars. So what we would like to do is essentially set our tax rate where it needs to be in order to fully fund Fire Station 3. But that leaves us with some money that we don't technically need for personnel or operating costs in FY '24. That totals $640,000. And so what we are proposing is to use that towards the actual construction costs to help offset that total and make that project more palatable from a cost standpoint. And so those two numbers together total $1.58 million. And what you will see then in the FY '25 budget is that entire 1.5 will be for operating lines. Because all of our staff will be on board and on our payroll at that same time. Working. So the equivalent tax rate of that is 2.2 cents. We are also looking to increase our paving maintenance program by $500,000. We do have some updated information that we'll get to a little bit later in the presentation regarding the total amount that would be needed to be considered fully funding paving based on some information that just came in about 48 hours ago. It's been a busy week for today. It works. But that $500,000 increase to the paving maintenance program, we currently funded at $800,000. That would bring our funding up to $3 million a year. That's equivalent to 0.69 on the tax rate. We also have in the budget a 1% COLA, 2% merit pool for a 3% total for our employees. That totals $479,000. We do have some data that we're happy to share with the board as we dig into the budget process later on in the months related to what our neighbors are doing. We came at a great time. We made some very aggressive moves where we wanted to be in the market, and we have been gathering data from our neighbors with what they are proposing to do in July, and then running that against where we landed to make sure that we don't lose the position that we just obtained. And so we do feel confident that the 1% COLA, 2% merit pool keeps us where we want to be. But we have some neighbors with very aggressive moves, 8% increases, even higher than that in some cases. And so we do think that this is enough, but it is something that we are watching vigilantly. And so we do feel like this pool and COLA are required in order to keep that plan moving as our neighbors make some additional adjustments.
I have a question.
Yes.
And I agree with that 100%. You know, for employees that do not get classified, we are employees. And I'm not suggesting that we get classified, but I am suggesting that you don't fall back into the situation we were when we got our last increase back a year ago. It was almost 9 years since the commissioner. Now, if we're going to keep pace with the town employees and making them come up, then I strongly recommend that when you give a COLA or increase to the employee, give the commissioner the increase so that we won't be stagnated and locked back. So we'll continue to move. That's the deal. That's just aggressive, making sure that we don't go back to where we locked into a position, because and that's old folks leave here, these young folks come take the position as commissioner. It's no longer a stipend that you can offer for us. If you want progressive people that's going to take our place, younger folks, they're coming. You're gonna have to give them something to keep pace with them. You know how the cost of living, gas, and all of this comes up. So I strongly would like to see the commissioner be included in the COLA cost of living. I know that's might be something we might do for the voter on that. I don't want us to get locked in 9 years again. Nobody overlook us.
And you're exactly right, Commissioner Whitley. When we made the notable adjustment for the commissioners with last year's budget, that wasn't what we talked about, is when there is a COLA that we would adjust the board. And so that 1% increase is applied to the commissioner salaries and the proposed budget. What the board ultimately wants to do with that will certainly be up to you all, but that 1% is in the budget. I did also hear from a number of commissioners, and I fully expect that this will be a large part of conversation through budget process. But I did hear a desire to start an annual funding line for affordable housing. And so we will talk more about that in greater detail here later on today. But as it stands right now, we do have the equivalent of a third of a penny in this proposed budget for an affordable housing program. The exact details of how the board would want to apply that money would certainly be up to the board. But right now, that third of a penny is equivalent to $250,000 and have that plugged into the budget that we are preparing to bring to you. We do have one new position outside of the fire positions in this budget, and that is the Public Works Engineering Project Manager. And the base salary plus benefits, we anticipate will cost $100,000 a year. And CJ is going to talk to you a little bit later today about the need for that position as they continue to have some capacity issues with existing workload, and then we anticipate some things that are coming down the pike that only increasing. So we'll talk more about that. Another thing that's in this budget that has been a number of years in the works is the the police vehicle replacement program. So when I got to the town 7 years ago, we were only funding replacing police vehicles at the rate of about 6 or 7 vehicles a year. And our fleet was, quite frankly, in very rough shape at that replacement schedule. So we have been working over the last few years to increase that replacement schedule. And so we do have the final leap to the desired replacement schedule in this FY24 budget. So this is adding, last year replaced 9 vehicles. This is moving us to 10 vehicles a year, which is then a 7-year replacement schedule for the police vehicles. We are also seeing some increases in the cost of vehicles. And so that is what is driving that number to be larger than what we've seen in prior years in order to be able to make that final schedule. So that is why. So it's not that one vehicle costs $104,000. That is one vehicle plus the added cost for every vehicle. Yeah, it's not. It's just a regular Ford. No big cars. No. If anything, we actually had to go back. So for some of our CID vehicles, we actually have to go back some simpler models, some more cost-effective models in order to get that number down to where it is. So we've already done that with that line. Again, we mentioned the police grants earlier in the presentation. We do want to make up for that funding that we do not anticipate having in this budget. Again, you'll hear at your board meeting on Monday night that we may be able to get a portion of that back, but that is not a grant notification that we received until I believe is October. And so it's not something that we feel like we can bank on in the budget, but we do feel like keeping the present number of positions for the police department is very important. And those positions do specifically focus on traffic enforcement, which we know is a vital importance to the community. We also are looking to increase our building maintenance fund. So this $50,000 is in addition to kind of our standard funding is around $50,000 a year. But as the years go by, our facilities continue to get older. And I have found myself saying on more than one occasion, it's okay to have functioning things. And so just the cost of keeping the buildings in working order continues to outpace how we have been funding that line. So we are looking to start to be more intentional about the amount of money that we are putting into the building maintenance fund. And finally, the park maintenance fund. So in working with Corey, looking at the actual cost of being able to keep our parks in good working order instead of just trying to work to a budget, which is sometimes leaving some pretty basic facilities underserved. If something breaks, sometimes it's taking a while to get it replaced. And we want our citizens to be able to come to our parks and be able to have working bathrooms and working water fountains, and for the grounds themselves to be maintained a little bit tighter order than maybe increase our park maintenance fund as well. So all totaled, these additions are the equivalent of 4.385 cents per hundred. So a few other considerations in the budget that you will see. So the first one is the town hall HVAC. I heard some comments this morning that it was quite chilly in here. That's good news. And this side of the building tends to behave a little bit better than the other side of the building. But the bottom line is we have had issue after issue after issue with our town hall HVAC for years. And have company come in and do an assessment for us related to is it fixable? How do we fix it so that we can actually have a functional system that does not require constant reinvestment in small parts and band-aids, and in order to replace the entire system, which was their recommendation, and this $500,000, which is quite frankly staggering, but that is what ours cost. Many of the parts of the system have been replaced over the years, but at the end of the day, the system is original to the building in many areas. The building is now original. So when we think back to the investment earnings conversation that we had, this is a great item that we like to kind of call out to have you perhaps think of using investment earnings be able to fund something like this in the budget. That way, if those investment earnings were to go away in FY25, a cost like this would also then not be in your FY25 budget. And so we're not going to translate to figure out how to make up that revenue. There is also approximately, I think, 6-month lead time on even being able to do replacements. And so we do anticipate we are going to need some mobile units and some extra fans and things like that, particularly on the other side of the building to get us through the summer. So this is something that does create for some rather uncomfortable working conditions, and with our servers and other technology in the building, not being able to maintain it at the appropriate temperatures is not good for the life of a lot of our equipment in the long run. CJ, do you want to talk? I've learned so much about HVAC, but I will turn it over to the experts to be able to talk about this.
Some of the, I guess, and from compressors on the outside, and then there are the other portion of it that is on the inside of. So to change them out, we require crane, something else like that, lock the vehicles, pull it out, push it back in. That's sorry, I got the terminology wrong. Push it back in.
The reason I brought it up is I wanted to create a crane. Thank you.
On the positive side, we are reducing some debt in the FY24 budget. So we are retiring actually 3 items of debt service. It's pretty significant to all happen in this school year. And so 2 of them are related to fire trucks. So we are paying off engine 1 as well as engine 2, and then a row of radios that were replaced and financed approximately 5 years ago. We also made our final payments on that in the FY20 budget. And so all total, that is going to be reducing our debt service by $424,000. If you'd like to see that, that is a reduction on our tax rate of about 0.6 cents. So when you combine everything together, we are really cramming a lot into this budget. And so if everything were to hold, and that's certainly the will of the board, but as it is coming together, total of everything that we have gone over is about 9.455 cents per hundred, about $6.4 million expenses. When you combine our new revenues, our increased revenues outside of our property tax rate, as well as the cost reductions that we find, we are going to be able to fit all of that into the budget at a property tax rate that is 4.8 cents above revenue neutral. And again, that's if we hold it 7.5 cents. That is the new rate as of 2 hours ago.
Question, I know we're going to talk about this later in the presentation, but what about natural growth?
Sure. So we only are able to get projections from the county for what they're anticipating in the next 12 months. So they take a look at what has come out of the ground in January. And so if something doesn't sprout up until February, you don't get credit until the following year. The problem that we have is we don't always know the timing of projects. So when something has been approved, when the developer actually moves forward with construction to the point that it starts making a notable increase in the values, that timing is something that's completely beyond our control. We also know how much the building permit was pulled for, but that doesn't always factor out into the actual valuation of the property. That is done separately. And so it's not a game that we spend much time in as far as trying to project out with any level of certainty of what we might be able to expect, say in 25 or 26. We have our historical patterns. So prior to this valuation, our average growth rate was only 1.8% annually. What we have seen based on the valuation that over the last 4 years it popped up to 2.74%. But that's still a relatively low percentage. When you look at the way that some of our neighbors are growing, that is a smaller percentage than what we're seeing in other communities, largely because we're actually growing slower than some of the other areas of Alabama.
So, where's my question, Rob? I guess, but when they start factoring in as January, so between July 31st of our last budget last year to January of this year, what has been built? I mean, what's that number? I mean, that's got to be pretty quantifiable. It's already built. 6% month range. Am I off base? You said.
This is probably going to be the closest way to answer your question. If you look at FY23 projected versus FY23 actuals. So the FY23 projected was a number that we got from the county this time last year. And then the FY23 actuals is the number that we got from the developer. And so that's where everything's that difference between the real property, the 4.65 billion to the 4.74 billion. That is what actually came out of the ground, generated new property valuation that is then taxed, that goes into the real account. Exactly. So this is also new for this presentation that was not included on the sign last week. So this was information that came to us about 48 hours ago. So what is not included in the FY24 budget, DJ is going to spend a lot of time later on today talking about paving maintenance, talking about where this number comes from. But we have, we're actually in the middle of formalizing and completing an updated paving maintenance study. And the number that we have been hearing for a number of years, that was actually a number of years old, that we were underfunding paving, was $500,000 a year. Based on this new study, they are now saying that we don't need $1.3 million to be funding our paving maintenance program. We actually need $2.5 million, which is a huge increase. So we do have the $500,000, that is the old number in the FY24 budget, which does bring that funding up to 1.3 million. But what we are hearing about the state of our roads and the desired level of maintenance that we want to keep them in is that we would need to increase that an additional 1.2 million in order to officially say that we are fully funding our paving maintenance program. So again, CJ has all kinds of charts and graphs and detail that he's going to get into a little bit later on today. But as it stands right now, especially with the news that we just received about our solid waste numbers, I was not comfortable thinking about adding additional dollars to the paving program. Certainly a board discussion if you want to see us do that, whether it is replacing something else that we're not funding in order to increase this line, or if we're looking to increase the tax rate. Either way, that is a big delta that right now does not fit in the FY24 budget. So that is something that if it is not addressed in 24, it is something that I would fully expect to be looking at a budget in 25, 26 that does start to fully address it to get us up to what is considered full funding.
I have a question, on the one, but who is the one quote, this consultant, they quote, who is that?
Is the Withers revenue?
Yes, that's correct.
One question, how do we go right? I guess that's I still have sticker shock from Harris for a few days here. It is a lot of money to go from 1.3 to 2.5. It's a little shocking, so I kind of think they give a breakdown, and is there a way to?
Yeah, and I'll get into that in my presentation. I guess, short answer is you never know, right? This is all modeling. But this is our best estimation of what it would take over time to bring that roads, keep the roads in. I'll get into the errors and whys in the presentation.
Thank you. So we did want to take a peek at what this kind of a tax rate does as far as setting us up for future funding. And we do that with our budget forecasting model. And so let me make sure that we can all see this. But this model is something that I built a couple of years ago in order to be able to start to look at what is the impact of funding something now versus taking on funding for something later? What do we anticipate in terms of natural growth, in terms of increases in revenue lines? Kind of how does that all start to factor out? And so it works in our various revenue lines that total the proposed budget. And again, this is based on a 27.5 cent. But if we wanted to say we are going to not take on the extra cost that we just learned about related to bulk waste, take that out and very quickly get yourself back to a 27-cent tax rate. So lots to discuss as a board regarding what we would like to do with that. But the big needle mover where this actually stayed very, very stable in FY25 years. The needle mover that we're now looking at as far as an anticipated tax rate is that paving bonus program. And so this does build in an additional $100,000 in paving maintenance in 25 and then the additional in 26. But that does directly impact your tax rate by approximately $0.015 in order to so it does get very expensive very quickly.
What was the dollar amount on the bulk pickup? And particularly, I'd like to know what that cost is, maybe per household. The estimate on that.
So the cost difference that we're looking at that is in a memo that you all will hear about on Monday is $389,337 worth of difference. DJ, it was $3.24 per household.
Yeah, I see it's $3 somewhere in that area per household.
Per month. Because, initially I was thinking we certainly don't want to reduce service, but I don't know. I'm thinking, so that's 350 times 12 is what? Yeah. 30, 40 bucks. I'm wondering if it's worth $40. Wondering if it's worth $42 for the convenience of it on the bed pickup. If I ask myself that, do I want to pay $42 or can I just wait and do it quarterly? Well, that's a question we have to ask.
And, the one thing that we continue to note, of course, is that Matthews doesn't have a solid waste. And so the increases like this are directly absorbed by our property tax rate. And so I do, from where I sit, do think having serious thoughts about the level of service that we provide. It really is a premium to have an on-call service like that at any point in time throughout the year, as many times as you want. If that is something that is purely being absorbed in the property tax rate, is that premium level of service really something that we can continue to afford when it's not something that is called out as a separate fee as some of our neighboring communities. So, so again, there's lots to move here, but if we were to say, we are just going to, underfund paving and continue to do that, which is not something I would recommend. You are right back up to what we anticipate likely to be able to maintain a flat tax rate for the next few years, barring some unforeseen circumstances. And of course, we do have bonds that we may eventually implement that would impact that are not built into this. But the big deal for this model right now is the information related to the solid waste fee as well as the pay.
Becky, I may have asked this question years ago, but towns who do charge a solid waste fee to residents, do they charge exactly what it is? Or like say, if we wanted to down the line, charge a partial fee just to unlock a little bit more funds, or you're only charging the resident? It may just unlock $1 million where it may not be the full cost. Is that something that they want to do or down?
And absolutely. So we've seen some communities that have charged, say, in the neighborhood of $6 a year. That is definitely lower than the cost of receiving that service, all the way up to communities that they treat it like an enterprise fund, and the true cost of providing the service is passed along 100% in the fees that they charge. There's certainly nothing that would mandate us to cover the entire cost of a solid waste fee, but it could certainly be something that is offset like you're talking about.
I'm just one of seven, but I just think that's potatoes and potatoes, and then it's still a tax, it's still a fee. I'm in favor of leaving them up to the free tax. I mean, end of the day, the residents are still paying the full freight, so I don't know if that's. I guess all it does is highlight maybe what the cost is, but I don't see any great benefit in doing it. I think it's a little trickery, really. I mean, it's still a tax, right? My opinion.
And certainly not the intention, as opposed to, just the entire cost of that service is very expensive. If we did have a fee, we might be talking closer to the tax rate as opposed to the tax rate that we have. So we just like to lift it up and remind the board that that is a revenue option that remains untapped in this community. If it's the will of the board to have it remain untapped forever, that is certainly fine. But it is something that is available should the board ever want that direction. So really to sum up everything that we just went over, we do see significant needed, planned, or desired expansions to operations in the FY24 budget. We do have them right now funded through a combination of increased revenues, retiring debt service, and otherwise conservative funding across many of the individual budget lines. We are looking at an effective property tax increase that would be proposed to generate sufficient revenue for those costs. Right now, again, based on the information as of 24 hours ago, we are looking at a proposed rate of 27.5 cents per hundred, which represents an effective increase of 4.8 cents per hundred of revenue neutral. And we do find that a tax increase in that neighborhood would be required to efficiently, effectively fund their operations for FY24. However, as discussed, that does not fully get us where we feel like we need to be with paving. And so that is something that we do anticipate is going to require future consideration in other budget years. And that being said, post tax rate, we feel that set us up to be well positioned for sufficient funding for in future fiscal years, starting that big room for books and haven. I'm happy to answer any additional questions. Otherwise, that is a flavor and feel of a lot of what we will be hearing in greater detail.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Clark?
Thank you. Becky, are you saying that the fire station will need no additional personnel between the 23-24 budget?
Now, what we are anticipating is that we would hire the personnel mid-year. And so that is $900,000 that would be spending in FY24. So all of those new employees would be on board with us as we get ready to open up Fire Station 3, and we're projecting September or October of 2024 is when that station would open if we continue with the planned schedule.
Okay, so it's been made clear that we must have Fire Station 3. So I was confused why the fully funding Fire Station 3 item is not up in the required mandatory area. In other words, we have to have those people in place before it opens up.
Because until the board authorizes construction, it's not a required add. So if the board were to say, that's great that we have justified the need, but for whatever reason, they're going to delay authorization of construction, we would not be hiring those employees because they ultimately don't have a long-term home.
So let's talk about the likelihood that happens where they're not going to, or is not going to authorize construction. I think the likelihood of that happening is pretty low. All right, matter of fact, close to zero. So that's the reason why I was asking why that line item wasn't put up into the mandatory area.
So I would say this, I am happy to move it, but when I look at the other increases that have either been formally acted on by this board or our mandates that are coming in from the states, we have zero control over those. The board still has control over the time of the fire station.
Right, and I totally understand why you broke it up the way you did. I'm just bringing up the point that the likelihood of us not going